That is the best intro sound ever. The sound of a Bloody Mary clinking away at the glass. Morning, guys. I start this off with a quick thank you to HDJ Redline. Thank you for the $10 super chat. I wish you had a comment on there so we could have a little pithy comment on it, but you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. Welcome. We're on episode 8 of Red Mornings. Carl's back. Thank God. How's it been, Carl? How was your last 2 weeks?
Oh, quite enjoyable. It was a lot of work, but I got through it. You'd be surprised at how much shit a person accumulates when they live in the same house for like 70 years.
Oh, I can imagine.
Become a big advocate of people should move every 5 years just to get rid of shit they don't use or need.
Oh, hey, yeah, so you just moved now, right? Or like recently here. Before that, when was your longest move?
The longest time in one place?
Yeah, longest time one place. Yeah, English makes more sense, I guess.
7 years.
Damn, that's pretty good. I was doing the math when you were telling me about that yesterday, and I've never lived in the same place for more than 5 years. It's at the point where I just bought Tupperware tubs that were the proper size for all my moves, and I had the exact amount I needed to move all my stuff. The nomadic lifestyle, people always shit on it, but it's so easy to keep your place clean.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's always my problem because it starts off clean, and then you just accumulate shit as you go. And I also have a lot of shit ton of kitchen stuff. Like I have every type of equipment you can possibly have in a kitchen, including like the dump shit.
Oh, you're one of those guys that love the single-use tools?
No, I don't love them, but sometimes I buy them just because they look so ridiculous. I just have to buy them to try them. Like, is this actually more efficient than just using a knife? Okay, it saves me 3 seconds.
All right, I'll bite. Give me an example. I'm really curious. I actually am curious.
Like, have you seen those egg cutters where you can take a whole boiled egg, you just put them on, and you just cut through, slice it up into nice slices?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're like two sets of wires, and you just clip it together like a lever or something.
Yeah, it's like, okay, it's a little easier, but it's way easier when you just use my chef's knife for it. It's easier to grab the knife off the magnetic thing I have on the wall, as opposed to going into the drawer and digging that thing out.
I was just thinking just having to clean that in between all the grids must be a pain in the ass.
The dishwasher.
Oh, fair enough. Although I guess I can't judge. I got a Madeline's tray in my fridge, so what's that for single serve? All right.
I'm a bachelor. Everything ends up in the dishwasher.
Dude, everything should, short of your cast iron pots, and if you have if you're one of those guys with the $1,000 chef knife, I can't think of anything not to put in the dishwasher.
Yeah, my chef knife never goes in the dishwasher, but it only cost me about $400.
So that must hurt you then. Every time you watch my videos, you see my $10 IKEA knife with the handle broken off, put through one of those Henkel's ceramic sharpeners that just beats the crap out of the metal. It must make you hurt inside.
No, it's a cheap knife. It would hurt me a lot more if it was an expensive knife and you ran it through one of those shitty sharpeners.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like you buy I buy really cheap cocktail glasses just for the sake of I break at least 2 to 3 a year. I usually buy 6, then I break them until I have 3 left. Then I try to buy 3 new ones. If they don't have the same series, I just throw away the 3, and then I buy 6 new ones.
Dude, we do that same thing because we always break plates and glasses. Now, question: do you break them or do your plates break them?
A mixture.
Because I found that for when I was single. A huge period for like 2 years where every time a girl would come over, something in my house would get broken or ruined.
My favorite one was my one of my exes who actually busted a high carbon steel knife.
How the hell do you do that?
Well, she was trying, because you're not really supposed to hit bone with them. Because bone can be really dense. So she hit it with the knife and she just cut a piece out of the blade. So the knife was still whole, but every time you tried to cut something with it, it looked like you were making mincemeats.
Oh, I can see why you divorced her then.
No, that wasn't the ex-wife.
Oh,
She
okay.
broke out. She was actually surprisingly good with the knives, even.
All right. Well, here, I guess all these guys here, we're kind of fucking around long enough. We might as well get to the topics. Fashionably late. Thank you very much. So I love the topic list we got this week. We got emotional control and reactivity, posers and pussies, discipline and motivation, hamsters, and a good diet. I love the emotional control and reactivity one. It comes up so much with married guys, especially. I have no idea did I come up with that one or did you?
I don't remember. We were just throwing topics back and forth in chat, so it could have been you, could have been me.
Yeah, but the reactivity one. So I'll start on this one quickly. Funny situation. You end up talking with a lot of guys. They'll start talking about their marriage, and then you give them a basic roadmap. Here's some dread. Get to the gym. Start pulling your time and attention away unless she's giving you something that's worthwhile, and stop looking at her for validation. Very simple stuff. Well, easy to explain, but difficult to implement. And then, without fail, the first thing the guys will do is start completely going reactive. I did X, she responded with Y. They treat it like they're figuring out a puzzle. And they always use the same adjectives. Like, for example, when the guy says the girl's having an emotional fight, he'll say, "I calmly suggest." It's always, I gotta say, I said it calmly. I'm like, if you just took a 5-minute berating from your wife, who cares how calm you are? Being a good punching bag isn't how you be stoic. Wink, wink.
So that was kind of what I wanted to get into, because I was I was going through something with a plate a while back where she dropped off my service.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of my gut feeling was to just be reactive and try to, get her back on the program. But like, okay, well, first off, I was looking at cutting her loose anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, she was never supposed to be a plate. She was supposed to be a one-night stand, but she just kept sticking around.
Damn her.
And number three was that frees up at least one day of the week where I can go out and try and meet new chicks.
Mm-hmm.
So, and kind of like the reactivity, it's something you see in guys who are inexperienced or do not date a lot, because they hang on the girl's every action and they just respond to it instinctively and instantly.
Wonder why you think that is.
Well, I just think it's because there's a guy, I think it's called Tom, who does a day game blog, and he sent out a great tweet a while back where he said something like, an average guy will approach like 2 girls a year. He might go on 1 or 2 dates a year, and he might bang once a year or something like that. Imagine a guy who's actively running game who approaches like 10 girls every day,
Mm-hmm.
goes on a date virtually every day, bangs 1 to 2 new girls every week. And you get so much practice being around women in that context that you've just seen it all. It's like the best thing you can do for your to get your reactivity and your emotional control down is live with a BPD woman for a while. That will fix that shit real quick, because you'll react yourself to death, or you'll just become distant and just become totally non-reactive, where your punching bag thing comes in. But I think that's where a lot of guys make the mistake, because they think emotional control is being emotionally flat. Like, they don't react to anything. It's like, okay, if the girl tells them, hey, I broke a coffee cup, you react the same as if she told me, hey, I'm 2 weeks late. And that's kind of a big issue with guys who are just learning stoicism. They think I'm not going to react to anything. And it's more about reacting at the right time with the correct response, but don't do it all the time. Because if she knows that she has you on an emotional cat string, you're screwed.
Oh yeah, if you got a trigger, she's gonna ping at it. Donovan and I were actually talking about that last week when he was on, where I was mentioning there were certain things that used to set me off in the relationship. So eventually I just stopped reacting to him, because then he goes, yeah, like Devin knows, listen, Devin knows what pisses my button. So every time she says that, I just go off into a rage. I'm like, yeah, it's because you do it every time. It's predictable. Well, though at the time there, we were talking about unpredictability, how you never want to be 100% predictable around your girl, because it makes it more exciting for her, keeps her on her toes, and it's much harder to manipulate somebody when he's not going to react in a consistent way to a consistent stimulus.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was getting at with the discussion we had the other day about Fish Girl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to assume that it smells like a fish market. But anyway, what I was getting at is a lot of the girls need a certain level of excitement and emotion around them, otherwise they go nuts. Like, we're kind of built, so if we could just have a totally predictable day all the time and just sit around and do whatever we wanted, that would be perfect. No reactivity, no anything, no drama going on around us.
Yeah, very relaxing, even keel. Like
when women are not built like that, they need that drama. They need to fuel off it.
Oh, 100%.
So what that comes down to is you just have to give her some of that. Otherwise, she's going to provoke a fight, or she's going to do some shit just to get a reaction from you. And if she can just provoke it, then it's not exciting for her. Then you become a dancing monkey. But if you react and it's unpredictable, like when you call your girl a cunt just randomly,
guilty as charged.
then it's kind of it's not predictable. Because most guys would not do that in public.
Which is weird too. Like, I get not doing it when you're at work and that, but when you're in public surrounded by strangers you're never going to see, like, who cares?
Yeah, I don't get it. It's a weird thing. Some guys, they never want anything bad to go down in public. And I get it from like a tribal perspective of you're like 30 people living in a tribe and something happening will ruin your rep forever. And we're still kind of in that mind space, even though you're in a big city with a couple of million people around you. So I kind of get where they're coming from, but you just have to work through it. It's like one of those things. It's like once you figure out that a conscience is just emotions, then you're going to ignore it.
And see, I disagree a bit with the tribe of 30 thing there, only because I've been in, like, on a ship. When you're deployed, there's 250 of you, of which you maybe only see 50 people every day. And we had that where people would, at first, the first 3 weeks of like a long sail are always the same. Everybody acts nice and professional. It's like that storming, norming, transforming. I can't remember what that system was called, but so everybody acts all nice, keep things even keel. But then after 3 weeks, it's impossible to keep the facade any longer. And then fights will inevitably happen. And what happens then is you realize, like, yeah, you fight it with somebody, you yell at them, maybe even get into a fist fight or whatever. But then, all right, now if you're done the fight, now you got to have dinner together because you have half an hour before work, or you have to go work together for the next 8 hours, or you have to go to bed right next to each other, like Bert and Ernie. So I'm wondering if the tribal thing, and at least for my limited experience, if the tribal thing is more of a perversion of it, as opposed to like an actual tribal situation where 30 people can have like public temper tantrums and beef, and there's mechanisms to work it out. Kind of rambling here, but you see where I'm going, right?
Yeah, but I think that's what we're kind of lacking those mechanisms. And especially today with social media, if you blow up on someone in public, you can risk that shit being on the news or on going viral. Like you saw that bus driver in Chicago who had that obnoxious woman punch him, and he just got up and he uppercutted her right there in the aisle.
Oh yeah, act like a man, I'm gonna treat you like a man.
And you know, in a normal situation, that would have not gotten any consequences whatsoever, except someone filmed it and it went viral.
Yeah, fair point.
So that might be one reason why guys don't want to be embarrassed in public. Like, so that might be one reason why guys don't want to be embarrassed in public. Like, have you seen a video with the guy on the kiss cam who's obviously in the friend zone, and the kiss cam lands on him and the girl he's with? And he goes for the kiss, and she more or less lands on him and the girl he's with. And he goes for the kiss, and she more or less vaults backwards to get away from him.
Oh, there's compilations of that video, man. There's so many of those around. It's embarrassing. Every friend zone who buys tickets around. It's embarrassing. Every friend zone who buys tickets to a Leafs game ends up on that thing. It's like they know, they can see the signs, and they just point the camera right at them.
Probably some red pill dude running the camera.
What's the matter?
I said probably some red pill guy running the camera.
What's the matter?
I said probably some red pill guy running the camera.
Really bored here. I'm gonna just blow up this guy's chances that this girl he's not gonna get. Watch this, Stan.
Yeah, I'm just gonna end this whole friend zone thing forever. It's like every girl gets her entire orbiter circle blown up.
Now at that point, you're making him sound like the hero that Gotham needs, not the one it deserves.
That would be a funny thing to do, like a comedy show about, if like a guy who just goes up blowing up guys who've been friend zoned.
Dude, I would watch that. That would make Saturday Night Live.
Guys who've been friend zoned.
Dude, I would watch that. That would make Saturday Night Live relevant again. But I was thinking too. So your motion control, reactivity. Obviously, guys are really worried about embarrassment. Doesn't that sound a lot like that reputation management thing that you mostly see like girls worrying about?
Yeah, for a lot, but it's a lot of the same thing because guys are becoming like bitches.
100%. That testosterone thing. I can't remember if it was a Limitable Man or you or AJ somebody, where they showed that there was like obviously you lose 1% of your testosterone per year after you turn 25. But they were finding a gap, like a 30-year gap, where 20-year-olds today had the testosterone of a 60-year-old man in the 80s. I think I got those numbers right. I'm pretty sure I screwed them up, but that terrified me, man, when you think about that. Like, what are the implications there?
Well, I think it's the testosterone, but I also think it's kind of the social world that we're growing up in because guys are being socialized as women. And most of the times with guys, it's like a friend of mine at one point, and he always brought a girl home. But in terms of quality control, it was a very, very mixed bag.
Basically, whatever hit the net.
Yeah, more or less. So what he did was, at one point, he brought a girl home, and she was leaving in the morning, and him and I were left in the apartment. And I just turned to him, and I started in the morning, and him and I were left in the apartment. And I just turned to him, and I started giving him shit about that girl, and he was like, "You know what? Fuck it. I was horny, I was drunk, and she was available." And just with that comment, he just made it very clear that, I'm not embarrassed whatsoever. I wanted to get laid. I didn't give a shit who I was sleeping with. I just needed somewhere to put my dick.
Yeah, the it's all pink type.
Yeah, and at that point, it's somewhere to put my dick.
Yeah, the it's all pink type.
Yeah, and at that point, you can't make fun of the guy.
Oh, yeah, that's the best. He's the best wingman, too, if you get him out, because you think he's covering the grenade, and he thinks you're covering the grenade. I had one of those. My Taekwondo guy, we were jokingly calling each other Ken and Ryu. I had one of those. My Taekwondo guy, we were jokingly calling each other Ken and Ryu when I was in Taekwondo, and that's what he was. Every fat, ugly girl he could find, that's the only ones he went after because it was just easy and not worth the hassle. And he said, "Oh, and they're very compliant." That was really all he wanted, was just like the simplicity of a girl who thinks she's punching above her weight. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. He was a good-looking guy too.
That's a clever move, though, because at that point we had that thing going on Twitter too with the guys we're going to talk about next, the pussies and posters. And those are the same guy, by the way. Because what we got was like the guy who was like, "Oh, I only bang 9s and 10s, and I do it constantly." It's like, okay, unless you're Hugh Hefner and you're living in the Playboy mansion, I doubt that's happening.
I like how you made it. You showed the statistics behind why it's impossible too. You set up your bell curve. You're like, these are where the 9s are, and they're spread on this geographical area. You basically have to fly to a different state every 2 days in order to meet this.
Yeah, because there are not a lot of 9s and 10s out there. Most guys are happy with like a 7 or even an 8.
4.
I think that kind of comes down to the point where a lot of them around the mean, like the difference between a 5 and a 7 is hair and makeup, more or less.
I'd agree with that, but you know me, I think all girls are between 4 and 6 anyway. Everything else is ego, investment, and fantasy.
So that was kind of my stance on it. With it's just there are so many different types of guys who just run around and they invent all this shit, and it's not productive because it doesn't help them move forward. Because we all know the juicy beggar types, like the guys who haven't been laid in a year and a half, and they're like, I only bang tens. I'm not even getting my dick out if she's under 10.
Yeah. Well, clearly he's been doing that to a T. 100% success rate. Never sleeping with anybody but 9s or 10s. His 9 for 10 success rate's at 0, but whatever. At least he's got his principles, right?
Yeah, it's just one of those ways where guys use it to protect themselves from actually facing rejection and actually having to orient themselves within reality in the correct way. That's one of the things I loved that Vox wrote about gamma males, that the best thing a gamma can do is go and do some form of martial art that includes sparring.
Something that you can't bullshit a failure with.
Yeah, because gammas are usually the guys who are extremely confident in themselves. They think themselves as being extremely high value. The reality is that no one else sees them in that way. And
that's their fault. It's not the guy's fault. It's always everybody else's fault. Yeah, you see that everywhere.
Classical narcissism. And the case with it is just that until they actually fix the gap between what they think they're worth and what the world thinks they're worth, they're never going to be able to interact with anyone.
Oh, I agree. But that's the weird thing. It's this odd feedback loop because they have in their mind their narrative. They've made their narrative, and then instead of working to achieve whatever their ideal narrative is, they just defend it with narcissistic rage, which freaked me out when I found out that's the only response that a narcissistic personality disorder can have once you don't acknowledge their script. Which makes me kind of understand why you get them school shooters, those Elliot Rodger types. They're going to be 1 in a million, but we have 300 million Americans. So, I mean, you're going to get a few of them every year, but I don't know if there's a way to fix them.
No, I don't think he think there is, because they have to at some point kind of fix their narcissism, because that's the problem. Like with Elliot Rodger, his problem wasn't that he was a narcissist; it was that he was an extremely unsuccessful narcissist. So he was constantly getting narcissistic injuries because he was thinking, okay, I'm a 10, and in reality, he was being treated as he was like a 1 or a 2. And that just kept reminding him of his narcissistic injury. And, you know, the whole thing with school shooters and the whole thing, okay, you can ban guns and you can take their guns away. But then shooters and the whole thing, okay, you can ban guns and you can take their guns away. But then they're going to start using knives, or they're going to start using homemade explosives or something else. It's just the weapon is a means to an end. It's not, and plus, if you're the guy who's like, I want to go out and shoot 300 fucking people, and I would if it wasn't for the fact that the gun laws make it so I can't get a gun. It's like, if you're okay with committing premeditated murder, you're also going to be cool with buying a weapon illegally or stealing it or something.
Oh, easily. Yeah, it bothers me. I see Americans having this gun argument, and it annoys the hell out of me. Like, I'm Canadian, you're European. We're not really big on gun. Well, I don't know if you are, but I can fire guns. I like guns, but I'm not going to be big on gun culture. But just watching how bad, as an outsider, I'm just stuttering my way through this one too. Like, I can see it. You can see the obvious issues with the solutions they're presenting, but they're just steadfast, and it's that same script that they have, and you have to go against it. But you know what? Forget this whole line of reasoning. I'm just mumbling my way through it. Just make fun of my shirt and let's move on.
Well, I like guns, to be honest. I'm a big fan, but I've grown up with guns, so I'm used to them. But I just don't think the weapons are the issue, because you have them. But I just don't think the weapons are the issue, because you have a lot of weapons in Canada too, and you have a hell of a lot fewer school shooters. There was the École Polytechnique type thing, and I think that's the only one I can think of in Canada.
Yeah, the Montreal tech guy. From what I remember, wasn't he a first-generation immigrant too, from China or something like that?
I don't remember. I just remember that he shot a bunch of women and a bunch of men.
Yeah, but it's Montreal. Quebec has their own. They're like their own little.
Not a bunch of women and a bunch of men.
Yeah, but it's Montreal. Quebec has their own. They're like their own little world.
But we also have to keep in mind that, America is leading in school shootings so much that Walmart is starting to put 9mm ammunition in back to school sales.
Are you serious? Oh, America never changed. That's hilarious.
That was actually a joke. So, but the whole thing with it is,
well, you had me fooled.
I don't think you can ever. The worst part is you actually figured, okay, that sounds like American. That sounds American. They'd probably do something like that.
Yeah.
Start with uniforms with bulletproof vests on them.
What's the thing? Yeah.
Start with uniforms with bulletproof vests on them.
What's the thing? Like, I get it. I think Donnie and I were talking about this one last week too. Like, I get the Second Amendment. They've decided that they want to be armed. They have their reasons for it, and the consequence of that is it's going to be easier for somebody to get a gun, and some people are going to get shot that may not have otherwise been shot without the same unrestricted gun laws. That's fine. That's a price you're willing to pay. The part that gets me is that, like, girls in general tend to, well, at least liberal girls, absolutely hate that idea. They're like, no, we have to do whatever it takes to stop these shootings. But at the same token, you get this soft harem Tinder society we have now where girls are chasing the top 20% of men, and there's a huge chunk of guys at the bottom of the Pareto distribution, and they're not getting any girls. Now, out of those, one in X amount of guys is going to be psychotic enough that he's going to go on a school shooting. But girls aren't going to make that same connection that we have to do whatever it takes to stop these shootings from happening. I found that interesting. Maybe they don't think of it that way, but to me, it's clearly a case of risk acceptance.
Well, for me, it's the same discussion we can have with cars, because you have a certain number of people that get killed, injured, and maimed in car accidents every year. But we've kind of made the judgment that we're accidents every year. But we've kind of made the judgment that we're willing to accept the risks of driving and having cars because of the value it brings to our society. So what I see the gun thing is, you have the people who think that that brings a great value to them and they're willing to accept the risk. And you get the people who think it doesn't give any value. And at present, it really doesn't, because are you going to have an armed uprising in America in 2019? Probably not. But could there be a situation where it turns out, okay, maybe it was a good thing that everyone had guns? Same thing, you don't technically need a law that mandates freedom of speech as long as it's being practiced, but it's nice to have that law if a dictator comes in and seizes power.
True. Yeah, if you have a society that's big on rule of law, which I like to think that at least the parliamentary democracy I'm in and the republic, whatever they have that the Americans are in, I like to think that people appreciate rule of law as much as they talk about the Constitution anyway. So here, one sec. Guys, you're talking about repeat dialogues. Are we having an echo, or is it just we're talking about the same shit? Like the second gets looped in resumes. Oh, I think we're just competing the same topic. Sorry, I thought the guys were saying we had an echo in here where they were hearing the same thing repeated back. I guess we're just not creative this time. Sorry, you were saying no.
We're going a bit in circles, but I think to bring this whole thing back to the emotional reactivity thing and stoicism and everything is that these are obviously guys who do not have the correct type of emotional control, because they're responding by getting angry at the world instead of working on themselves. And I think that's a good segue into the posters and pussies, just on the basis that there are a lot of guys who they don't want to do the work required to get the person. They don't want to do the work required to get the to be seen in the way they want society to see them. And if you're not willing to put in the work, you're going to have to do a lot of things to kind of trick people into thinking it. And that's one of the things I disliked with the original game, was that it was basically a cheat code to appearing like a high value man. Because like I know now that I do the whole aloofness thing very well, and it's not because I think, okay, she sent me a message, I need to be aloof. It's because I'm fucking busy. I have a lot of shit that I'm doing all the time. So sometimes I won't respond to someone's texts for 2 days.
Right.
And I think that's what it comes down to. All the behaviors we do are just functions of who we are as people. And unless you're willing to do the work with yourself, you're not going to be able to get the results you want. Unless you're willing to do the work with yourself, you're not going to be able to get the results you want. And that's kind of the topic of the gendernomics book that I dropped yesterday. Was also and thanks for the cover design, by the way. I was surprised at how good you are with what looks good considering the shirts and all.
Just had to slip that one in there. Thank you very much. But yeah, it's hard to believe I'm that fucking good sometimes.
Yeah, you just have to take that skill into your shirt selection template.
Dude, I like eclectic things. I don't care. I'll own it. Even this shirt, as much as it's like a standard blue polo shirt, it's still somewhat freaky. No, the part I loved about your book, and I remember when we talked about it, I'm totally going to fluff your cover art in your book. I hope you don't mind here, you guys. I know we're supposed to be talking about sexual dynamics, but I'm talking art. So I know the way you talk about intersexual dynamics from the first gendernomics book was it's very clinical. Intersexual dynamics from the first gendernomics book was it's very clinical, and it has like you said, it has an economic idea to it. You're talking about incentives, you're talking about what people want. It's got that. And the weird thing is it reminded me of two things. So I have a book here, One Man in the Universe from Aristotle. I picked it up at a garage sale like years ago. And then I was thinking, it kind of reminds me of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And so I looked back and I saw their first edition prints of those. And I really like that classic calfskin leather bound book, like with the double set of leathers. It's got a certain permanence to it. Plus your first book looked like a 1990s fucking textbook on graphic design. So I just couldn't handle it.
Yeah, but thanks for doing another cover for that one too. I'm still in review with Amazon for some. Thanks for doing another cover for that one too. I'm still in review with Amazon for some reason, probably because I unpublished the old one and republished the old one in a new form. So they probably have to do some extra controls on it.
But yeah, but I guess. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
No, what I was going to say was the whole point with the new book was I just kept seeing all these guys, and you have two kind of camps on it, because you have the guys who come in and they just want, the GameSpot strategy guide to bitches. Mm-hmm. They just want to know, okay, what do I say in this situation? They're treating girls like it's Final Fantasy X. They just want to finish off the Chocobo race in 39.2 seconds so they can get the special reward, so they can unlock the magic cave and get their sword out.
One-dimensional people solved with one-dimensional problems and solutions.
And then you have the other guys who are like, okay, they're going to do everything. They're going to start eating right. They're going to start lifting. They're going to start solving their psychological issues. They're going to start solving their financial issues, their living situation. And it's just an overwhelming volume of work that you have to do on top of, the normal work, like going to work, having your job and handling that, making sure you're doing all the other stuff. So the problem is how do you organize that in a sensible manner so you can make progress on everything without kind of going in circles? Because everyone knows the guy who's been going to the gym for 3 years, and he pretty much lifts the same weight he did 3 years ago, and he looks the same way he did 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be that guy, and it's not a good thing 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be that guy, and it's not a good thing for guys to end up in that kind of limbo. Because they're they're doing the work, but they're not getting the results. So the whole thing with it was...
Well, they're giving the work lip service.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So what I wanted to do with the second book was just kind of organize, okay, if you have, like, my favorite there is I did an example case study where I invented this guy, Dave, who his life is a complete train wreck. He's like 30... working part-time as a pizza delivery guy, smokes a ton of weed. He's like 30, working part-time as a pizza delivery guy, smokes a ton of weed, plays video games constantly, hasn't been laid since the Nixon administration, lives in parents' basement, 400 pounds overweight and everything. Where does a guy like that start off? Let's see.
Listening, I'm just seeing we're having some looping issues here with the audio loops.
Yeah, it might be YouTube fucking up because it sounds good for us.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, guys, you might have to suffer through it. I'll see what we can do on this end, but just let us know if and when it goes away for you. You might have to suffer through it. I'll see what we can do on this end, but just let us know if and when it goes away for you. Yeah, no, that was the point. So that part is great. You're putting it in like concrete steps, how a guy goes from zero to hero. How do you build the foundation work? How do you start when you're behind the 8 ball? The reason I like doing that cover for you is because it's kind of like those old classical books there. It has the subtext of it is it's the same way that Adam Smith's book kind of kickstarted capitalism. It's a foundational work. And then people will still look back on it. So I like giving it that sense of permanence where people can look at this going, it doesn't matter what country you're from, what time zone you're in. And I like the meta conversation around, because like I said, it's a subtext thing. Because you know, as much as anybody, when you're talking to somebody, what you say doesn't matter so much as how you say it. As much as anybody, when you're talking to somebody, what you say doesn't matter so much as how you say it. And my intention was, when you're bringing that book in front of somebody, you should read this book. And if they see, you know, some goofy pictures of dudes hitting on girls at a coffee shop, they're gonna be like, oh, whatever, it's just a fad, it's Twilight for dudes. But then when you see it and it's got that certain like hallmarks of classical literature, of important foundational literature, that it kind of gives it more gravitas. And that was the intent with it anyway.
Yeah, I really like that with it, because it gets more of a, it has kind of the same design aesthetic as Rollo uses for Rational Nail, but it's not the same design.
No, well, his is contemporary. Mine, I did as best I could to replicate as much as I could of the way they used to create leather-bound books, like with the roping on the side, the two-tone patterns. Like I actually went out of my way to find a proper calfskin pattern. Those calfskin was what they would use back then for their vellum. Like, yeah, there's a lot more detail in it that I don't like. I'll be jerking off about it for hours, so I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's all on purpose. It's like delicious tacos. Everything's in there for a reason.
Yeah, I really like the look of it, so I look forward to seeing the paperback cover and how that looks.
I'm going to look forward to see once you see some guys start posting tweets where they have, because you got the 2, and I think you're working on a 3rd, are you not?
Yeah, well, I haven't started working on it. I have a couple of things that I'm thinking about, because I'm not sure if I'm going to do, because I've started writing on something that deals with online dating.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure if I'm working on something that deals with online dating.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure if I'm just going to put that out as kind of a gift to everyone who follows the blog or something, or if it depends on how much work I end up putting into it. Like Gendernomics, I think it's about 45 or 50,000 words, about 150 pages, I think. And Building Value came out in print to be about 110.
Right.
So it's a little shorter, and the reason why it's shorter is pretty obvious, because it doesn't have a lot of the typical gendernomics part in it. It has about, let's say, the first section is just talking about value in general, and that's just kind of to give guys a primer on, okay, you have objective values, you have subjective values, you have things that influence value. So you, like, if you have something that's rare, that's going to get an extra boost in value just because of rarity, and that type of, just so guys know that value is not a constant, because it's very easy to think of value as a constant, but it's a variable. A guy who's a 10 in a given location can easily be a 7 in another location. Same for girls. Like a 10 in LA is not the same thing as a 10 in bumfuck Idaho.
Oh, God, no.
And like, if you live in a town of like 3,000 people in the middle of Saskatchewan, a 5 can easily be a 10 because she's the hottest chick in town. A 5 can easily be a 10 because she's the hottest chick in town. And it just has to do with kind of it's the opposite of Rollo's global sexual marketplace. It's the extremely local, practical sexual marketplace, because once you get into a situation where your choices are highly limited, you're going to go for whatever's there. Naturally.
And your brain will probably hardwire to make it seem like the best option for you too. We're very good that way.
Yeah, so if you're on a ship with 250 other sailors for 6 months and there are 2 chicks there, they become 10s.
Dude, we actually have a term for it. We called it Navy hot. And it was the weirdest thing, because girls would be, they're objectively a 5. They'll probably, when they first join up, girls tend to be fairly slim, but after 6 deep fried meals a day, they get the POS, and it just basically explodes. And they always get chunky. Most people get chunky, and they get the POS, and it just basically explodes. And they always get chunky. Most people get chunky in the Navy. It's just the way it works. But because you're in, and it's midnight shifts, it's all red lighting, so all the skin blemishes disappear. And I remember this. We got this French electrician on board, and she was gorgeous. Everybody was all over her. It was midnight lighting. She looked great. I enjoyed every time she'd come up to the bridge and give her give her report to the captain. And then I remember as soon as we hit the foreign port, we were in San Diego, I think. And then she got out, and her face was just a nightmare, and she was chubby, and I was seeing all these California girls, and I'm like, at that point, we had to make like a rule, like, guys, we got to start bringing porn on these trips so we never forget what girls look like when we start getting thirsty on board. Like, holy crap. It is amazing how bad that gets. And then the girls themselves, they start acting like they're 8s and 9s when they're just a 5 too. And so it's really, really off-putting once they get ashore. And that's how most fights started, was that these girls would be 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. As soon as they get around normal girls, then they become like a 5 or 4, and that instant drop of male attention got violent. Like, girls would throw shoes at officers of the watches, take swings. It was really sad to watch.
Sounds like maybe that should be your book. Crazy Sea Stories. Why you don't bang chicks on ships.
700 pages in. I've gotten to chapter 2. Oh. But
the thing with it, and then the whole reason why I wrote the value chapter was just kind of to get that out of there, so guys don't run around, because that's kind of the worst poser I run into, is the guy who's all objective.
Mm-hmm.
I think it feels like he's on fucking Grindr, because he's just listing off his stats, like, I have a notch count of 400, I have a 10-inch dick, I'm 6'4", 250, 10% body fat, perfect skin according to whatever scale. I have an IQ 148, skin according to whatever scale. I have an IQ 148.
A type 2 jawline, or what's the type that you want? Type 1?
I have no idea, but...
By the way, thank you for showing that to me. When that guy said I have a type 2 jawline, I had to look that up. I'm like, my God, those incels need to have a hobby.
You know, it's just kind of the all objective guys, and those are the guys who are going to struggle most, because very little of what you do with girls is objective.
Oh, great, 100%.
You can't get a girl into bed with empirical means. You can't be like, here's my bank account, here are my genetics report. I mean, we're not talking Solarian fucking mating here, for those of you who played Mass Effect. Because those guys are acting, and just to do that reference, because the Solarians are a species of people, they're some kind of reptile, and they have really short lives, but they're really high IQ and really hyperactive. So their mating is that the families control who mates with who. And in order to get a mate, you have to provide your registry of all your ancestors and all your genetics and all your accomplishments, and then the family makes the choice of which guy is hired to impregnate the female. And a lot of guys are acting like that, and that's where the kind of the worst kind of pussy thing comes in, where I'm not perfect, so I can't ever go hit on a girl. Pussy thing comes in where I'm not perfect, so I can't ever go hit on a girl.
Dude, that's weird that you mentioned that, because I remember I worked with an old German lady back when I was in my 20s, before I joined the military. And she said back when she was a kid in the 40s, that they actually made her parents do that too, where they had to show their lineage before they could get married.
If that was in the 40s, that was the German racial purity laws, the Nuremberg laws, because they actually
allude to it without outright saying it, but yeah.
Yeah, so yeah.
Outright saying it, but yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I
call it Argentinian.
Yeah, it was the post-Kaiser Germany.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's weird. Like you mentioned that's also funny. Part that really make me laugh too is that once you start showing off your resume to a girl in order to get her, that reminds me exactly of the epiphany phase girl who starts setting out her list of demands about what she needs because she needs to have a baby in 6 months. And it's funny having these playboys, or playbongs as I call them, and they're playing that as if it's an alpha quality, when it's really the opposite. Like, it really is the opposite. It's TradCon, it's beta bucks, Like there's nothing about it that's good, and it's the weirdest thing to hear flexed about because it just comes off as awkward.
Well, that's why I love the whole cadre of like Epiphany Face / post wall women who are showing up on Red Pill in the Red Pill Twitter sphere, and who are showing up on Red Pill in the Red Pill Twitter sphere, and all running this whole same kind of fucking gambit where it's like, no, you don't have to go out and have plates. You need to, find one good woman, and you can bring out her transcendent femininity with your archetypal masculinity. It sounds like a Jordan Peterson with the slightly higher testosterone.
That's the beauty of it. Make it vague, and you can bullshit anything to fit it.
Here's me in pants with the Technicolor hair. Here's me in the dress. See how good of a woman I've become? And it's like, you're still the same chick. You changed your marketing.
Yeah, changed your marketing. You put a coat of paint on it.
Like, I can go ahead and buy, a couple of 1,000 gallons of arsenic and rebrand it as baby formula, but it still doesn't change the fact that it's arsenic.
Symbols of femininity. I guess that's the girl's equivalent of having
arsenic.
Symbols of femininity. I guess that's the girl's equivalent of having bacon-scented beard oil. It sounds like all the feminine things, all the words that you heard that were really good for women that you ignored, and now it's like, oh yeah, I got all those. I have a sun hat. Trust me, I'm a good girl.
Yeah, and the whole thing with it is just, I get why girls do it, and it's pretty much the same thing as a poster thing, because what they're doing is they're just changing their marketing to get the rewards for something that they're not. Yeah. It's kind of like people are like, yeah, I'm going to start working out, and everyone's like, yeah, good on you, and then they never go to the gym.
Oh yeah, you've already got the dopamine rush. Why follow through at this point?
And same thing with the posters, because they're probably, very few of them are probably all that, because you can usually tell a guy who's around game. Probably all that, because you can usually tell a guy who's around game.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have a much more nuanced perspective. Like, it's the same thing with, you can also always tell who goes to the gym regularly, because no guy's going to be like, yeah, I went to the gym and did 12 sets of 405 bench presses. Like, no, you didn't. But because it's not believable, because it's so exaggerated.
Yeah.
Or like, I just ran 28 miles in half an hour earlier, or I run a 4-minute mile, and it's like, no, you don't. So it's just, they're too unrealistic with their estimations. It's like if you said, I bang a 5 or 6, 2-3 times a week, new ones. That's believable if you run game, because that's possible.
Yeah. Heck, if anything, I suggest it has to happen, especially if a guy's had a dry spell for any length of time. I had one old client back before I was doing this for money, and he would talk about me, and he was in his 40s, late 40s. And when he first got into game after his divorce, he wasn't any good at it at all. So he actually picked up like a portly Puerto Rican girl, like a 4. He said it's his 4. But she goes, you know what? It's fun. And because I'm in good shape right now, I've got, a nice place, and she has a lot of fun around me. She treats me really well. Sure, she's kind of ugly now. I've got, a nice place, and she has a lot of fun around me. She treats me really well. Sure, she's kind of ugly, but whatever. And then he ended up getting another one. I think it was a black girl, also kind of chubby. But then he was noticing, and this is why I think those guys who only bang 9s or 10s are bullshitting more than anything. He kind of noticed that he would be out at the bar then and running into a 7. And she seems kind of nice, but she's really bitchy about it. And he's like, at this point, is it worth all this hassle? I know the girl at home's not nearly this cute, but she's way easier to deal with. And then he naturally developed that abundance, but not because he was only banging 9s or 10s. It's having those lower girls that you maybe really don't like and you aren't afraid of losing, that kind of give you that abundance to actually start seeing the girls that you may really be interested in and not getting intimidated by them, I guess, for lack of a better word, or putting up with their bullshit. I love those stories. Those game stories are my favorite.
Yeah, it's I said that on Twitter the other day too. I would rather take a guy who's an incel and start getting him laid with 1s and 2s than take a guy who's banging 9s now and get him to that 10 level.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're making a much bigger difference in the guy who's, total train wreck. If you can, sort of take the train a little bit back, so it's not a complete train wreck. It's just a fender bender, so to speak.
Right.
And once you get those first steps down, you can start working your way up. So like, there's no shame in, hitting on ugly girls or, bench pressing with just the bar. There's no shame in that because it's a step to something greater. But guys, they want to go from, being overweight to looking like AJ Cortez in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like I say every chance I get that I because of that accident when the car hit me, I've got arthritis in my hand, so I can't do any pulling exercises without hooks. I just can't. Like I'll do a warm-up set with bent over rows at 50 pounds, and I'm still wearing the hooks on my right hand because it's not that I don't have the strength for it. It's just pain. So the kind of guys that have put in the work and they've had a couple setbacks, like they don't even mind these kind of things. It's the same as when you're at the gym. If I see a fat person at the gym, a fat girl, a fat guy, I never sneer, I never make fun of them. I actually prefer seeing them there than the guy who's got a protein shake sitting on top of his bench press bench, doing a bunch of presses with those cargo shorts and a backwards baseball cap. I'm like, at least he's here for a reason. You're just here to like feel the vibe, go through the motions.
And it's just, I think guys need to, being a poser is the worst thing you can do for yourself because you're not going to get out there and start doing the work. And once you start doing the work, you're going to start seeing those small successes, and those are going to snowball into bigger successes. That's the one reason why I can't completely hate on Jordan Peterson, because his clean your room shtick is really good in that you start with the small things that you have control over, and that will snowball into more areas of your life. And over time, you will become an example to others.
Yeah, I agree. That out of all of his little 12,
become an example to others.
Yeah, I agree. That out of all of his little 12 rules, that's kind of the one that I appreciate. I could tell he kind of had to fill out the list there because you need a nice big round number, and 12 is as good as any. Like the letting cats play on their skateboards, I didn't quite get, but whatever. But I agree. Yeah, just controlling what you can control. It's something that anybody can get behind. And even though I make fun of it by telling people to wash their dick, I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing because a lot of guys just need that one win. Like if Elliot Rodger had gotten that one win, would he have gone nuts? Maybe not. And I think that's kind of if your life is a train wreck in every area, the odds of you doing something stupid is much bigger than if it's just fucked up in one. Because most people have something fucked up in their life, one area that's kind of they have a problem with or that they have no control over, like guys with crazy mothers, or they're divorced and they have to co-parent with some chick, or they pay alimony or whatever, and that's one area of their life that's fucked up. But if you can do good in the other ones, that will kind of weigh up for you. And just
100%.
Let's think about where you are and where you want to end up. And that's one of the things I got from Ed Lattimore, that you always have to be aware of the goal, but you have to focus on the process. If you don't enjoy the process, you're just going to torture yourself. And if you're not getting results, you're going to get demotivated and quit.
That's funny. You just described the problem of discipline versus motivation in a nutshell right there.
I know. That's why we're transitioning into that topic.
Clever man.
So that was just my whole thing, because I've been going to the gym for years with mixed results, because if you're cutting, you're never going to have that. You're going to get the neural adaptations, but you're not going to get the muscle growth because there's just no calories for it.
Right.
Some people who are extremely overweight can do both cut and build muscle at the same time, but it's highly limited if you're reasonably lean. Like if you're under 20% body fat, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's
reasonably lean. Like if you're under 20% body fat, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, that's with diet too. Fasting, intermittent fasting. Quincy, a guy on my Twitter feed, he's 350 pounds when he started. He does 7-day fasts once a year. He does 35 hours once a week. Like he can do that because he's got a lot of extra fat stores to burn off of ketosis. If I got you to do that, you'd probably get brain damage after a couple weeks, like with that amount of cutting with that little fat to feed off of.
I do 3-day fasts on the once every quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And I do 16-8 or 24, a little bit depending on, right now I'm trying to bulk up, so I'm eating a lot more. So and that's difficult in its own right, because if you've been cutting and you've been kind of extremely focused on sticking to a certain calorie goal, if you've been on, let's say 2,000 calories.
Yeah.
And suddenly you have to eat 3,200. That's work.
Oh, I can imagine. Are you at that point yet where you just start throwing like fat on top of like olive oil drizzled on everything you eat just to get the calories in?
No, I'm not that bad because luckily I get some extra booze calories here and there that help.
That was me last week, man. I feel you.
Plus, the whole thing with it is just with getting progress, you need those. There's a great business principle that if you're doing something really big, make sure that you set it up so you get a couple of. If you're doing something really big, make sure that you set it up so you get a couple of quick wins right off the bat. You can just show some results to get guys motivated and to keep going. Because once guys see, okay, we're getting some results, they'll keep going, and you can keep the budget going, you can keep the resources available. But if you're like, okay, we're going to have to invest $100 million over the next 5 years, and we're going to see results in Q4 of the 5th year, that's hard to get that pushed through a budgeting process.
Oh, it's impossible.
We could push 100 mil into a ton of other things that will get us a lot faster results. So why are we supposed to do this? And so I just like to keep it, structure everything. And I talk about this kind of I just like to keep it, structure everything. And I talk about this kind of in the genomics, but structure it so you get some wins. And try to focus on, okay, you'll always have a couple of big things you're working on. Like in my book, I use the example of weight loss. Like the guy's major issue is his weight loss, and he's just too fat to run game. Too fat to run, period. And the problem with that is going to be if you have to lose, let's say, 100 plus pounds, that's going to take you 1, 2, 3 years, depending on how disciplined you are. So that's going to be a long-term goal, but it's not like you're going to wake up, you're going to be fat, lean. It's going to be a gradual process where you get leaner and leaner, but focus on, if you have other things you can work on, okay, work on, lifting more and make a goal out of lifting more weight. Make a goal out of, small things that you get wins on as you go along throughout the process. And then that, okay, you have your big thing as you go along throughout the process. And then that, okay, you have your big thing down here, but work on the other things. Like, don't put off starting to learn game until you're perfect in every area. Like, you don't have to, be AJ Cortez levels of lean
before you even start.
And, Tanner Guzzi dressed. I'm not sure how the fuck he pronounces his last name.
I always go Guzzi, but that makes him sound Italian. I don't think they have many redheads in Italy.
No, me neither.
It's funny. I speak to him all the time. Still never asked how to pronounce it properly. Just never came up. Tanner's easy enough. I got to ask him next time.
But anyway, so you don't have to have everything lined up and perfect. You can work on stuff because let's say you have 2 things you need to do. Let's say you're skinny as fuck. You need to put on muscle. And, you dress like a 1980s bodybuilder. And, you dress like a 1980s bodybuilder. All tank tops and cargo shorts. And it's like, okay, you do need to sort your style out and you need to put on some muscle. But if you're going to gain, 20, 30 pounds over the next 2 years,
right?
Probably not smart to put $3,000 into a new wardrobe.
Well, here's something, another angle that I like. I always talk about this to clients, is that they need to learn how to fail. So, for example, take that fat guy you said needs to lose 30 pounds until he's in good shape, 40 pounds until he's in great shape. Have him go and run out day game now. And he's like, yeah, but it's not going to work. I'm like, of course it's not going to work. You're going to get 2 things, though. You're going to get used to rejection, and you're going to start noticing the exact same things you did at 240 pounds that made girls roll their eyes and give the save me eyes to the chat around the corner is all of a sudden going to start working once you're at 200 pounds. Because I find if you wait until you're AJ ripped before you even start, like you're missing that understanding of what your effort was all for. Like, why did I bother getting in shape? I just talk to girls and they meet well. I could have done this before. You're like, no, you couldn't. But you're not going to know that. I could tell you that, out of shape guys are never going to get hit on. But until you start seeing a controlled experiment where you're doing the same opener, the same approach on the same type of girl in the same situation, and seeing it have two drastically different effects, you're not going to be able to map your work to the success attached to it, not as well as you would if you waited too long. Plus the fact that once you're in shape and you have no game because you haven't practiced at all, you're spent another 6 months there learning how to talk to girls without stepping over your tongue. Better to make those mistakes when you're unattractive and nobody cares anyway.
Yeah, the good thing with it is then once you start getting lean, and you don't even have to start hitting on girls. Just talk to the cashier, ask the random woman at the grocery store, just walk into like something like an Asian food aisle or some kind of weird, just walk into like something like an Asian food aisle or some kind of weird cuisine. And, when some chick walks in there, just ask her, have you ever tried this product? And just start a conversation and learn to have conversation with strangers. I think that's why sales is such a great gig for guys who run game, because they have to actually go up to people they don't know and start a conversation all the time.
Right.
And that's the hardest step. Once you're in the conversation, you can always move from there.
I think that's why a lot of that e-com Twitter is big, and they always follow Red Pill Twitter. Like, they crap on us with beef every now and again, but I think they do appreciate the that sales approach to game.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what guys, they want to be able to get the results, but they don't want to put in the effort, or they don't have the motivation. And instead, they just want the reward from random social media people. So they start off, playing the role of a high value man, because they don't have the discipline or motivation to actually do the work. And they get some of the rewards because they get likes, they get retweets, they may get some random chick that sends them nudes, whatever. And they get the reward, but they don't do the work. And if you don't have that high of aspirations for yourself, just kind of getting that reward is enough for them. It's kind of like with the guys with the sex dolls. It's like, okay, a sex doll cannot possibly be as good as having sex with a real woman. I mean, I can see the benefit in that you don't have to do a lot of post care except, throw her
throw in the dishwasher.
But I kind of see that the low maintenance aspect is kind of like calling a plate versus jerking off. Sometimes you just want to get off and get on with your day, and it's kind of, even with the plate, you're going to have to do some level of pre and post care. Even with the plate, you're going to have to do some level of pre and post care.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you call a girl and you're like, hey, come over and blow me, that might work once. If you do that 2 or 3 times, she's going to start to feel cheap, and then you're going to have to pull out something extra to keep her around, whatever.
Or constantly build new talent around that. I agree. Yeah. It's not a sustainable thing.
So you need a certain level of maintenance. But I think you had one very important case there with having the guy run game when he's at like 240. Because the worst guys to teach you how to run game are guys who've always kind of been the high value. Guys have always been in shape, always been kind of middle of the road and top in 1 or 2 things.
Mm-hmm.
And who started hitting on girls when they were like 12. Because
naturals don't have that self-awareness.
So they just don't know what they're doing. They're just, well, I'm just being myself. This is just who I am. And they don't see, and that's the big gift that the early pickup artists gave us. They actually went out and they studied these guys down into, the bro crush detail level, where they know, okay, this is what he does. And if you've grown up with a guy like that as a brother or as a father, you naturally get that training when you're young. And I think that's what happens with a lot of the guys here. They're kind of anything from 5 to 15 years behind the learning curve, and they have to find the motivation and employ the discipline to actually get ahead of the curve.
Dude,
and it's not that difficult.
It's not like what?
It's not that difficult, really, because the average, if we take like the 10% or 20% of men who are natural chads,
mm-hmm.
and you just put a big red cross, let's just pretend they don't exist for a second. Then you have like the next 30, 40, 50% of guys who are the guys who kind of serial monogamists with, they have their dry spells, they have their issues, and they end up in an LTR, and the only way they can get sex is in an LTR, so they kind of follow that path. Those are
Right.
the guys you have to compete with and catch up to. And those guys, maybe they hit on like 2 girls on average a year. And then they
Only when
date
it's convenient, when the stars align.
And those are the guys you have to beat out first. Then once you get to their level, then you can start focusing on Chad levels. But even Chad doesn't, do 100 approaches in a month.
No, I agree. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember in college I had a Chad. His name was Paul. He was 6'2". He looked like The Rock minus the steroids. The man was gorgeous, and I couldn't go out anywhere with him and hit on any girls. It was just impossible. They all just drew to him. They'd throw me out of the way to get to him. But it's funny you mentioned that Chad lacks the self-awareness, because I remember this. He wasn't the brightest guy, and he had so much abundance that he ended up like just not brightest guy. And he had so much abundance that he ended up like just not like turning down a lot of girls. And so my game at that point was just like the scraps. Once they tried hitting on him, he shut them down. They think he's an idiot, and then they find me, who's like not quite as attractive, but fairly attractive, and a lot more fun to hang and talk with. It ended up really helping me on the date wise there. And so you don't even really have to compete. I don't think you have to compete with Chad. I mean, nobody has to compete with Chad. You just have to be a compliment. As long as you got your own skill sets that are outside of his, the girls are naturally going to filter through, and the ones that are more attracted to yours and the ones that are more attracted to his will naturally filter themselves out. Sure, he'd get 5 girls for every one I got, but and the ones that are more attracted to his will naturally filter themselves out. Sure, he'd get 5 girls for every one I got, but I mean, that's still plenty of enough for me.
Yeah, so that's a good thing because you learn how to work your specific angle. And I think a lot of guys have to get into that because it's something I'm going to write about sometime in the near future, which has to do with tailoring of game.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, are you familiar with the concept of tailoring a methodology of game?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, are you familiar with the concept of tailoring a methodology?
I think I am, but I don't think I've used those words for it. It's essentially where you just take Jesus and make him work for you, as opposed to being a fundamentalist. Is that a fair?
Well, it's similar, but what you do is, let's say you're doing, let's say you're using like a Porter's 5 forces analysis. It's a very classical thing in business. And you don't necessarily have to use all 5 forces because not all 5 forces are going to be relevant to all industries.
Right.
Like if you're working a public sector business, some parts of it is relevant, some are not. So you can just cut out the parts that are irrelevant and you focus on the parts that are very relevant. And it's the same thing with game. If your skill set leans more towards, let's say, it's the same thing with game. If your skill set leans more towards, let's say, most guys are either pro night game or pro day game. They have a stronger skill set in one. Like if you hate clubs and you hate bars and you don't drink, you're probably better off learning day game. And then once you decide that you're going to learn day game, you have some standard like the London day game model, but you can also go in and see, okay, have some standard like the London day game model, but you can also go in and see, okay, this guy uses humor, this guy is good looking, this guy is, are you familiar with, I think it's called Yad? The guy who had like the Yad stop, where he'd make like a really exaggerated like way of stopping a girl when she was walking.
No, I don't know this one. I'm curious though.
But it kind of sets the frame for the interaction that I'm a fun guy to be around. Because he can make them laugh just with the way he stopped them on the streets.
All I can picture is him walking in like Kramer walking into a Seinfeld set.
Yeah, it's actually similar. I mean, look it up. I think it's on YouTube. And you have to kind of get to that point because it doesn't matter. You can be very, very motivated. But if you get punched in the face 50 times, that motivation goes away. And then you just have to rely on discipline to kind of punch your way through it. But there's a limit to how long discipline can keep you on track too, because a great example are bodybuilders who are going in stage shape. The last like 3 months before they go on stage, they're at home, they're at the gym, or they're traveling from home to the gym because
they never leave their house without the cooler full of meals.
No, but they're cutting so hard and on such a discipline that they cannot have any form of temptations. Like if they go to a buffet, they'll put away 10,000 calories of desserts because they're so disciplined with their approach. And that's kind of building a system to be successful because they've realized if I go to, the candy store, I'm fucked. Successful because they've realized if I go to, the candy store, I'm fucked.
Same. The fucking candy store.
So it's the same thing with guys. You have to kind of identify your niche where you get the most success, because if you keep going into niche where you get the most success, because if you keep going into niches where you get absolutely beaten the shit out of, you can keep doing that, but then you have to go back to your own niche for a little while and get some successes and then go back into it, because then you don't demotivate and crush yourself.
Yeah, well, that's just like the gym, progressive overload. You don't go in there and try and hit your 1 rep max every time you go in. You maybe push 5% once a week and back to your normal. Maybe take a deloading day.
Like every fucking, like I had that debate with someone about training, because I run a very high volume program now. I do something like 40 or 50 debate with someone about training, because I run a very high volume program now. I do something like 40 or 50 sets every time I go to the gym. I'm in there for like an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Dude, how do you do that? I can't even get through the Giraldi 8x8 without dying.
So what I do is I had to work up to that level of volume. So what I do is I had to work up to that level of volume.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off, like usually what I do a strength cycle followed by a build cycle followed by another strength cycle. I say that I'm doing that. In reality, it doesn't always work out like that, but that's what I'm trying to do.
Right.
So what I do is when I get off a strength cycle, I use 2 to 3 minute rest periods. I do maybe, if you say I do 30 sets using 5x5. So it's not a whole lot of volume in there. And then once I switch to the other one, I just start increasing volume progressively. When I just start increasing volume progressively until I get it to the point where I peak on volume. And once I peak on volume, I go back to strength. And, having a lot of pre-workout with you with a lot of strength. And, having a lot of pre-workout with you with a lot of caffeine, it helps.
Oh, yeah. Those are my favorite, the pre-workout drinks. I don't know if you do those or you make your own, but essentially just for me, it's creatine, liquid caffeine, and then like maltodextrin or some simple sugars to kind of get things going. Although I'm pretty sure I don't need the latter.
No, I buy the ready-made shit. I think the branding and marketing on that is hilarious, though.
Monster X Animal Pack.
Yeah,
test something.
The evil slasher pre-workout. Big picture of a huge knife on the front. Evil slasher pre-workout. Big picture of a huge knife on the front.
Oh, dude, that reminds me. Do you remember, this was probably about 10 years back, Animal Pack?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I remember they had that video series where the guy was like a black and white, looked like a 1990s like rock video, where the guy in black and white, really grainy, went to his gym in the middle of a basement and started lifting weights. And it was just like one of those pump you up videos. It was awesome. Everything, he had chalk on his hands. Didn't matter what he was doing, legs, he still put chalk on his hands. He always had to wear like the unlaced military issued boots. Half the time when you're just sitting there with like one of those giant boots. Half the time when you're just sitting there with like one of those giant chains hanging around your neck, doing like the paint cans thing. Just, I fucking love those videos. I used to watch those religiously. Those and the scene from Conan the Barbarian where he freed the princess out of Thulsa Doom's castle. Those were my pre-workout videos. I always loved those. And nothing to do with the topic at hand, but I just wanted to share.
No, but it's just what keeps you motivated, and you just have to focus on it. And it's kind of that fine line between doing enough to get progress and beating yourself to death. Mm-hmm. Enough to get progress and beating yourself to death. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of my thing with the 100 approach thing too, because if you hammer out, like I've seen some very spurgy gentlemen treat the 100 approaches as like they're grinding XP to get their character to the next level. So these guys will just hammer out like 100 approaches in like 5 hours.
Oh, are those the ones that focus on the metric so much that they forget the point that the metric exists to address?
Yeah, they just focus on the metrics. So they have a notebook with them that they're just kind of crossing them off on, and it's like they don't even focus on what the girl is saying. They just approach them, say hi, and then move on to the next girl. You know, the whole crazy, pointless shit.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And then they don't learn anything from those 100 approaches. They just did them to do them. And then supposedly like the genie will come out of the bottle after you do 100 and grant you the ability to have game. It's a weird self-sabotage, I got to admit.
Yeah, those guys all never stay motivated. Like they're hyper motivated for like the first 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Then they grind out like the 100 approaches. They read like 17,000 words on game. And then they're totally demotivated, and then they don't do fuck all. So that's kind of the thing I'm getting at with those guys. You need to do the work, but you need to do the work right. Because just paying lip service to it and not having the discipline to kind of check your own ego when you're fucking along. Like, I log all my workouts with work rates and work volumes just because I want to be able to go back and see, am I actually progressing or am I not progressing? Because I think tracking metrics are the most important thing in anything, just for the simple reason that if you're trying to go from point A to point B, and that's you have to drive 100 miles, it helps to know how far you've driven and how far you have left until you reach your destination.
I agree. Yeah, just once you get into that realm of all they're doing is watching miles as opposed to like paying attention to the road, that's when they start running into problems.
Yes, I think we had a conversation about that on Twitter not too long ago, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But it was, oh yeah, it was some crack I made that you have the guys who they find the red pill and they get so into the self-improvement thing and they get really into lifting, and you talk to them after 6 months and they're like, this self-improvement thing, and they get really into lifting, and you talk to them after 6 months and they're like, hey man, it's awesome. I just got my deadlift up to 300. I'm crushing it on the bench, and you're like, did you talk to any girls yet? No. Shit, I knew it's based on something. It's like everything we do here is means to an end. We're just trying to improve your sexual relationships. And, you know, doing 100 squats is great, but you're doing that for a reason. Doing 100 squats is great, but you're doing that for a reason. Just make sure you're not
ignoring the reason and focusing on the metric.
After leg day.
All right. We give a quick shout out here to Donnie. He's in the chat. I guess he's creating us an intro. I'm a little bit worried after John created that intro for me. I'm not sure if I want it.
Oh, I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I guess it was just I was telling my buddy about this from back in my sailing days, and he laughs because he goes, "Oh, it's just like when you sailed and everybody kept calling you the Mexican." And I'm like, I know. And the most annoying part is there was like 2 El Salvadorians on our ship too, and they never got this grief. You get these goofballs from like somewhere on the rock, buttfuck nowhere in Newfoundland, and then the first third world country they have from like somewhere on the rock, buttfuck nowhere in Newfoundland, and then the first third world country they ever visit is when we take a port visit to Ensenada, and then so that's what you are. I went from the token generic minority to the Mexican. It was ridiculous. And then the Somalian thing, it just started to give me that little childhood repressed memory of that. I'm like, here it goes again.
No, at least I know how to pronounce your name now.
Oh, for fuck's sakes. But I was thinking, back to your diet and metrics. Good example, I could think of that one was our last topic about diet. Because I think, you know, those guys, they'll do the calculations. You get your TDEE. Okay, I need 2,500 calories a day, and that's it. And then that's all they focus on is just the 2,500. They eat the same meal every day, 7 days a week, but they aren't noticing that for whatever reason their metabolism runs every day, 7 days a week. But they aren't noticing that for whatever reason their metabolism runs a little bit faster, that runs a little bit slower. They're getting brain fog. They don't have any strength when they go to work out, and they realize that maybe they cut a little bit too aggressively, and by the book they run a little hotter than normal, and they refuse to change these things because that's the system. Or when they're trying to cut weight, but they aimed a little high, and they're not losing weight, but they refuse to adjust. It's probably one of the most frustrating things too, because Like you're right. They're hyper motivated, but you're not trying to build motivation because motivation is just a feeling. It's like being horny. You jerk off once and it's gone. But discipline is you set up a process in place. But then if you get too far into discipline, then guys kind of ignore how the effects are playing out because they're just so focused on the process they refuse to change anything because their finely tuned Swiss watch of alpha home will break down if they add an extra chickpea to their meal.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I mean, I got this great thing from, I think it might have been Eric Helms who said it with dieting.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you have levels of right and wrong. So ideally, you hit your calories and you hit your macros from good food. Slightly worse, but still good. You hit calories and you hit protein, and you might not do that from all the right food. Third one is hit calories. Third one is hit calories. Fourth level is fuck it.
The cheat day.
Because ideally you want to hit 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. You want 85 grams, I think, of fat, because that's from what I remember from a study I read, that's the kind of the amount of fat you need to take in every day for your hormone production to be optimal, testosterone, etc.
Yeah.
Carbohydrates, there are no such thing as a required carbohydrate, but if you're doing high volume training or you're working out real hard, you're going to need to have at least 100, 200 grams of carbs in there just to keep your glycogen full and topped off.
Yeah. Now, granted, you can also use protein for that. If you go overboard on protein, you can take 25% of the calories you get from a protein and convert it to a carbohydrate. I don't know how, because that's the energy loss for that conversion. So even there, you have a bit of a buffer, where if you go a little higher on protein, a little lower on carbohydrates, you'll still survive.
But especially post-workout, I want to keep in mind that carbohydrates help shuttle protein to the muscle.
Yeah, through insulin.
So pre-workout and post-workout carbs, like I try to time most of my carbs to before I work out and after workout, so that peri-workout window. And then it comes down to like food choice, because I think everyone has to kind of come around to the fact that calories matter. And that's like the most frustrating thing I deal with the guys when they get into their diet shit is, no, calories don't matter. All that matters is if you eat 8 avocados a day, calories don't matter. Or you just eat meat, calories don't matter, and so on. You just eat meat, calories don't matter, and so on. There might be some truth to it, because like I've done low carb diets, and if you're eating bacon, eggs, and steak, like real fatty, like steak cuts and shit, you're not really hungry because you get so much fat and so much protein. But so you probably eat less, but you're probably going to get to a point there too where you're eating perfect at your maintenance calories. So I just like tracking calories for the pure sake of it's easy and it's predictable. Like I've tried everything, but my cutting has never been so predictable as when I was just simply counting calories. And then you just have to account for bloating and constipation or whatever.
Yeah. That's why I like fasting, the intermittent fasting. It's like a great buffer. Because if you're eating 2,000, 2,500 calories a day on a cut, and then you go over because everybody goes over, you're 2,000, 2,500 calories a day on a cut, and then you go over because everybody goes over, you're always going to have something, a work function, or you're going to accidentally steal that cookie. You take an entire day for an intermittent fast, and that cuts instantly, whatever the math is, 1 out of 7 days of calories out of your diet, and that gives you that buffer to work with. Or maybe if you're one of those guys that can't cut properly and still eat a proper meal, then the cutting gives you the ability there to have proper sized meals that'll actually make you full, so you don't have making mistakes. But you're right, the calories are they're such a great metric because they're really hard to screw up. And it's like supplements. That extra 5% difference it makes if you get the macros on point and disregard the calories, if that's true, like that's fine. But I'd rather focus on the 95% success you're gonna have just by watching the main number of calories.
Yeah, and just protein is important. But I have days where you don't have control over them. So I carry protein bars, I carry protein powders. So just, if you're going to a work function and you're going to have one of those meals that are just pure carbs and fat, you can throw in 80 grams of protein powder before. And if you did the fast, you already have the buffer for calories. So if let's say you're eating 2.5K on a cut, and you're I like if you're just doing a normal cut with minus 500. I'm a bigger fan of increasing activity over cutting calories. So you just keep eating exactly what you're eating, and you just do more work.
Makes sense.
And then to get a little bit into food choices, because I think that's a bit relevant too. It's just I try to focus on the rule of thumb that if it existed when my grandfather was a kid, it's cool.
I like that. I mean, you can't go wrong with it. I like that. I mean, you can't go wrong with it. Yeah, I'm actually trying to think about it now. I'm like, I can't think of an example where I could say, well, what about this? I really can't think of one.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
No, like I stick with eggs, steak. I do some milk, but not a lot of it. Oatmeal or oats, more specifically. And I use a lot of rice and potatoes. That's my main carb sources.
Same. I usually use a lot of sweet potatoes too, or yams. Depends on who you talk to. The orange ones.
Yeah, no. The reason for that is simply that pasta is just something that I have issues digesting.
Same. It gets you fairly bloaty. You always end up retaining a bunch of water, and it always makes you feel sluggish the next day, I find.
Yeah, so I just try and stick with rice and potatoes. But there's a limit to how often you can, how many potatoes / sweet potatoes you can eat, because they're kind of filling. Rice is nice in that you can eat a pound of rice and you're hungry again 20 minutes later.
Yeah. I like corn too for tortillas.
Hungry again 20 minutes later.
Yeah. I like corn too for tortillas. I find that's a nice little one there.
Yeah, I don't eat many tortillas, but then again, your girl is a big one on Mexican food, so.
Yeah, that's where she was from. She was born in a small town, Mexico. Parents were snowbirds, and they had her down there. And I guess they had a restaurant for years. And because she was technically a Mexican national, she was allowed to own property. So here she was, like a 3-year-old kid with all Mexican national. She was allowed to own property. So here she was, like a 3-year-old kid with all this property in her name. Pretty clever, actually. If you decide to have a kid and you want to own beachfront, anything within 100 miles of a beach. Pretty clever, actually. If you decide to have a kid and you want to own beachfront, anything within 100 miles of a beach or a coastline, just have like a kid in Mexico and then sign everything off to them.
And just make sure your kid doesn't get pissed and when they're 15 get emancipated.
No. All you got to do then is not do what all those emancipated kids do. Don't steal their money Macaulay Culkin style. You'll be fine. Actually, here, Rule Zero Dad, he had a good one here, which is amazing. I didn't know about it for the longest time until my buddy started talking about marathons, but chocolate milk as a post-workout.
I never tried that.
Yeah, well, I remember, he was talking to me about it, and he goes, when you take all the different post-workout drinks and all their macros and their calories and their, what's the word for how easily carbs are digested? The GI? Or, what's the word for how easily carbs are digested? The GI. And he goes, chocolate milk is essentially like naturally the best in all of those cases. It's got the right amount of sugar, it's got the right amount of protein, the right amount of fat, it's got the perfect GI. The protein's got just enough digestibility, and he's like, it's the best thing ever. And you wouldn't think it, because who drinks milk when you're hot in the sun after a run? He's like, it's the best thing ever. And you wouldn't think it, because who drinks milk when you're hot in the sun after a run? But he goes, yeah. Once he did that, he's never gone back to any of the $50 supplements.
No, I just use regular protein powder at post-workouts.
Mm-hmm.
But that's usually because I try to time my training, so I'm having my dinner like an hour after I train. So I do a post-workout protein shake, and then I go home, shower, and then I start preparing dinner.
Nice. I'm getting to be an early morning guy. I like doing it early on just so I can get my metabolism up during the day, so I don't end up slacking off, because especially on this last week where I was gone in Mexico, I have had so much catching up to. I still haven't even put the last episode out yet, and so I'm going to have this one and that one, plus the emails, plus the clients, plus I'm trying this one and that one, plus the emails, plus the clients, plus I'm trying to get writing still, and the blog, which I haven't updated in forever, which really bugs me. My newest one's going to be good, but I find, if I do that workout beforehand, it gives me, I have like enough energy to carry out throughout the day without having to chug a bunch of coffee or smoke cigarettes or whatever it is people do, or vape. No, people vape now anyway.
No, my thing is I just never got into working out in the morning. I like ideally between like, let's say between 6 and ideally between like, let's say between 6 and 9 o'clock or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that just for the sake that you're already warmed up because you've been up and going. You've gotten at least one meal in.
Right.
And once you get off work, it's nice to be able to go directly from work to the gym, and you just work out, and then you go home afterwards and just relax for the whole evening. Like,
oh, so for you, it's like an unwinding thing.
Yeah. If I was working like you and I was just sitting at home all day, I'd probably do it in the morning too.
I can't help but think that's a bit of a slight.
No, but it's just I see a lot of the guys who are kind of in your situation where they're not going to an office. They like to get their workout done before lunch. But in my case, I would have to work out between like 6 a.m., 6 in the morning and 8 in the morning, and that's a little bit too early for my taste. And that means I have to get up at like 4:30 and have my coffee. And getting up at 4:30, that kind of fucks up my fucking.
Oh, dude, I can imagine. The military screwed me up on that. It was on my PLQ course where we had to get up at 4 o'clock every morning. The military screwed me up on that. It was on my PLQ course where we had to get up at 4 o'clock every morning. And the girl's been like that too. We've never been able to sleep in past like 6:30 since then. And the only advantage I can say from those super early morning workouts is that your brain isn't up. And so it's impossible to rationalize it once you got a habit in place. You just kind of go through the motions. You're like a zombie. But the good thing about zombies is as long as they get brains, they do exactly what they're supposed to do, right?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. There was some discussion going around in the chat about white rice.
Oh, that? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm seeing that one too. Yeah, it was just the early morning workouts. The one thing I liked about it, and it was from my time in the military. Yeah, I'm seeing that one too. Yeah, it was just the early morning workouts. The one thing I liked about it, and it was from my time in the military, like basic training, PLQ and that, is that once you're up at 4 in the morning, even if that's your normal schedule, you're never really up. You're kind of a zombie. And so once you have your disciplined process in place, you just kind of go through the motions and you don't even think about it. That's the only thing I can suggest for people who want to do that 4 to 6 a.m. workout.
Do it like, what the fuck else are you going to do at 4 a.m.?
True.
Unless you're drinking from the night before. But I also like to kind of like I usually go to bed at around 11 to midnight to get a good night. So it's a good thing with trying to get the girl over to my place, because like usually weekdays are when I'm trying to set up first dates, and then weekends I like to have a sure thing lined up.
So why do you do it that way then? Is it just because the first dates got less chance for success, so you just kind of want to put it there where there's no pressure and everybody has to work early and you can always cut it off, or is that just the way it worked out for you?
Mostly because if you're trying to bring a girl home on the first night and you have a coffee date at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock on a Monday, she's not going to be in the let's call it slut defense / last minute resistant mindset, because how often do you think a girl has been taken out for coffee at 4 in the afternoon, gotten bounced to a couple of bars with a couple of drinks, and then bounced home, and she had a one-night stand on a Monday?
That's a good way of putting it. I never thought about it that way. That's deceptively clever.
Like, if you're asking a girl, like, the reason I know the girl I was supposed to go out with tonight is a sure thing. She agreed to meet me at 9 o'clock on a Saturday. That's basically saying I'm going home with you tonight.
Oh, I thought 9 in the morning. I'm like, what?
No,
that's
I would
true.
never
Yeah.
At 9 in the morning. That would conflict with doing all these shows.
Well, you were gone the last 2 weeks. I can only assume.
No, but I think that's and also with the weekday thing, it's because you don't want to ruin a weekend with a shitty date. So, and most of the time, weekends are going to be times when we're people or want to go out like friends and whatever. So doing it on weekdays just frees up time.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because when I was running a game, I never had the same opportunity as you to plan it like this. For me, it was just I was in sometimes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, sometimes Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I just had to pick the days that I had. I didn't have a choice.
No, the way I figure it is, and also if you have a great date on like Monday, Tuesday, you can set up a new date for the weekend when you close the girl. So it's just a matter of trying to work the logistics with everything else, because I do quite a lot of time management just because I have so much shit going on all the time. I kind of have to plan everything in, so I know, okay, this window is gym time, this window is whatever time. Like today, this window is gym time, this window is whatever time. Like today, before the show, what I do before we do this show in Redman Group is I always do my laundry, because I know I'm going to get up late because I went out Friday.
Right.
I know I'm going to start drinking here, so I usually run down and start my laundry, and then I run out and get something for breakfast because I need to eat something before I start drinking the Bloody Marys, and then continue with whatever else I'm drinking during Redman Group.
I'll be switching over to singletons, by the way.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to go with gin tonics. Went a bit heavy on the beer yesterday.
Such a 90s drink. I love it. The original flavored vodka.
Well, the thing I love about the gin tonic is if I'm drinking a scotch, I'm sitting there. The thing I love about the gin tonic is if I'm drinking a scotch, I'm sitting there thinking, what flavors are in this? How did they age it? What was it stored in? If I'm drinking beer, I'm questioning, okay, what was the recipe for this? What hops are they using? And that type of thing. If I'm drinking a gin tonic, it's a fucking gin tonic. I'm thinking about gin tonics. And I know they're trying to fix that with having all these fancy fucking tonics and shit. But it's still a fucking gin tonic.
That's ridiculous. You know what? I love gin and tonic because my dad used to drink them. I can remember. I was probably 5 when my parents divorced, but I remember he always had the flat of the airport-sized Schweppes tonic waters and gin there. And then it came back in the 90s, back when the bars used to have black light, because it was either the gin or the tonic. I don't remember which one glowed under black light, which was awesome. And so I just kind of grew fond of it from those two experiences. But I would hate to have that if I were starting to drink it and somebody's telling me that that's not it from those two experiences. But I would hate to have that if I were starting to drink it and somebody's telling me that that's not artisanal. That would annoy the piss out of me.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, look at this. This is elderflower goji berry, artisanal, locally produced tonic water. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah, exactly. Just like Real Dad said, juniper, done. Shut up.
Gin tonics have 3 flavors. It has citrus, bitter, and spice in some form. That's it. It's not supposed to have anything else. It's like, it's the same thing with like whiskey Coke. It's the same thing with like whiskey Coke. Why are you trying to fuck that up?
Oh, you mean like with the guys that add like the nice Islay scotches to a Coke?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm against the capital punishment in general, but I'm for keeping it just for that.
That's what I was thinking. Canada, we developed the worst whiskey on earth. Rye. Absolutely horrible. Just so you can mix it with pop. And you guys are pissing away that gift. Rye. Absolutely horrible. Just so you can mix it with pop. And you guys are pissing away that gift we gave you. Yeah, just take the Canadian Club, add a Coke, add Crown Royal. Crown Royal is like the way every redneck can think he's an aristocrat is by drinking Crown Royal. So just get on that.
Yeah, what's the thing with Crown Royal anyway? Doesn't it come in a bag or something?
Yeah, well, that was what their big selling pitch was in the 80s, is that it had this nice velvet bag that said Crown Royal and the bottle shaped like a crown. Even the military, we sent off to the company, and for the 100th anniversary of the military, I could actually put my name and rank on a thing, and I could put it on my own bottle, so I'd have a personalized bottle of it. But the thing about Canadian whiskey is that we don't have the same strict standards that Scotch does. So it doesn't have to be made in a certain geographical area. The mash combination doesn't have to be consistent. It just has to have some rye in it, not 50%, not 51%, not 100%, just whatever. And then the age, some rye in it, not 50%, not 51%, not 100%, just whatever. And then the aging's not consistent. So it's like the Wild West. And that's why you're going to notice you're going to drink, let's say, a Canadian Club, and it has that hard taffy flavor of like your alcoholic uncle's breath, versus Wiser's, which is going to be a lot milder, versus something new that's coming out of Saskatchewan that tastes closer to a Scotch. But yeah, it's just completely inconsistent.
Yeah, I just usually always buy a Johnny Walker Red. It's just a safe bet.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like if you're gonna get just a plain drinking whiskey, at least that you know what you're getting in for every time. It's not gonna change from barrel to barrel, from thing to thing. You're gonna mix it just fine. Although you don't get a velvet bag, which is going to be good if you start playing Dungeons and Dragons or something, because I remember that was the thing when we were like 12. Everybody would have all of their dice in a Crown Royal bag. Just a nice mix of nerd and redneck together.
That's interesting, because I never played Dungeons and Dragons.
Really? I did?
That's interesting, because I never played Dungeons and Dragons.
Really? I did as a kid. I think I played it till I was like 13. But then that's when Nintendo came out, and then that's when I gave it up. But yeah, my brother and I were talking about it because the wife, she was telling him, like, don't you hate how every time something happens, Ryan has to make up this story afterwards about what could have happened and how it would have progressed? And she goes, this annoys me. And he goes, oh, yeah, it's because we played D&D as kids and he was the dungeon master. I was like, I totally had forgotten about that till he brought it up.
Yeah, your wife is slowly learning how nerdy you are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so I used to hide it. Like, I used to turn off like video games every time she came over when we were first dating and that, and now anytime I want to do anything nerdy or watch movies and that, she just kind of knows it's coming. Like I'm probably gonna sneak her off to Avengers. I know it's weird how like there's this alpha beta divide on whether you actually like watching superhero movies or not. I don't really get into it. I'm just trying to avoid spoilers.
No, I just loved how Tate went ahead and spoiled that shit on Twitter yesterday. That was just epic.
I missed it, but by luck, I just happened to be taking a crap at the time, so I missed it through my timeline. Thank God for that.
My favorite thing about that whole thing was just how many guys were, how much, it was like, it takes a certain mindset to go and watch a 3-hour-long movie just to fuck it up for a bunch of nerds online.
I didn't know it was 3 hours long. I didn't know it was 3 hours long. That's hilarious. Tate, man, I never tire of the guy. I know you said that the reason that a lot of us get along is because of that blunted affect, but just sometimes where he has like this blunt way of sticking it to somebody that you never would have thought of.
I just hope someone's going to take me up on my suggestion the other day, because he has this thing with Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
So I was like, some Star Wars fan needs to track down where he lives in Bulgaria or Romania or wherever, and put one of those, my other ride is the Millennium Falcon bumper stickers on his Lambo.
Oh my God, I would love that. I would actually start listening to some Playboy if he pulled that off. Maybe that guy who cried during the Star Wars trailer do that.
No, but the funniest thing, the reason was, I would love to see someone put that out on the Red Pill Twitter timeline, just his Lambo with that bumper sticker. And I would love to see Tate kick that guy in the face when he noticed it.
I would actually like
to see Tate kick that guy in the face when he noticed it.
I would actually like it better if Tate wasn't there in time to catch the guy. Just hearing him go off on like a 30-page rant about how he has to like, and I know it would probably do something to screw up that rainbow finish he's got on his one car too. But I just like his multi-tweeted threads where he rants about something. Keep your Star Wars. I'll keep my billionaires.
What was the one? I'm going to be fucking all the hosts. Luke, I'm all your fathers.
Nice. Oh, okay. I just realized the time. We got 15 minutes. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna see you in like 15 at Redman Group. You good to go?
Yeah, I'm good to go. I'm just going to get another couple of drinks before we go on. Just mix like a pitcher of gin tonics, and you just sit here with like a half-gallon thing with gin tonic, and you just hear the clinking in the glass.
Oh, that's smart. I should probably start doing that. All right. Well, anyways, thanks guys so much for listening. Red Morning. We'll catch you in 15 minutes in the Redman Group. Donnie, Rule Zero Dad, thank you guys so much for sneaking in. I love seeing you guys in the chat. It's nice that we got 4 people telling these guys to nut up. So I'll catch you guys in a few minutes. Take care.